Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Molly and I'm a knitter based out of the San Francisco Bay Area where I live with my fiance and our cat Lola. On this channel I talk about all things fiber arts, mostly knitting with an occasional splash of crochet, so if that sounds like something you're into, I hope you'll stick around. I haven't made a normal podcast episode, show the projects I've been working on, etc. in about a month now. Now that we're pretty deep into December, I'm starting to feel the crunch of the end of the year. I'm doing a pretty mediocre job on my Make 9 right now, and I leave the state in a few days, less than a week. I'll be leaving to go to Alabama to spend the holidays with my fiance's family, and then I won't be back until after the new year, so it feels a little bit strange and kind of like this is the end. This is my last chance. Although I know nobody really cares but me how well I'm doing on my own goals. I'm not super rigid about my own goals, and there isn't something that magical about the beginning of the year. It's not like the projects I started immediately disappear once the clock hits midnight on January 1st. So it's totally fine really if I don't finish everything I hoped I would. The world will keep spinning, I'll keep knitting, I'll get to those things eventually, or maybe I won't, and that's also okay. So whatever. This month I have 2 finished objects, 2 works in progress, and 3 sort of groups of acquisitions. So let's go ahead and jump into it, starting with my finished objects. Neither of my finished objects are new. You've seen them both before, which, I mean, it makes sense. I'll start with my Simple Thing shawl, or shawlette, scarf, I don't know. This is a pattern by Melina Brell. This was my commute project for the last month or 2. I made a lot of shorts while I worked on it, so you can go ahead and check those out if you're interested in hearing more about this project. This is a free triangle shawl scarf pattern, and I made it in Ancient Arts yarn, Nettle Soft DK, in the colorway Cheshire Cat. I did find out later that Melina Brell, who I think also goes by Heathland Knits, has a pattern for like a stockinette version of this as opposed to garter that is actually called something Cheshire Cat related, so I feel like I missed a little bit of an opportunity there, but that's okay. Nettle Soft DK is a merino nettle blend yarn. It's 68% merino, which is superwash treated, and 32% nettle fiber, and apparently nettle fibers are very environmentally friendly and low impact, so I think that's pretty cool. And it's pretty soft. Like, I think when you hear nettle, you expect something pokey, but it's pretty soft. The yarn is 263 yards per 100 gram skein, and I used nearly the whole thing. I think I probably used about 102 yards of yarn. No, grams. 102 grams of yarn. I measured my ball before I started to make sure that, like, I knew exactly how much I had, and I tend to think of skeins as being a little bit over rather than under usually. So I didn't want to get to a 50-gram ball and not be able to finish the shawl because I'd made the first section, 55 grams. That worked pretty well. I have 5 grams left. The ball is somewhere over there. And I think I decided to decrease when I had used about 50. So when I was measuring, about 57 grams remaining. So that worked out really well. I had plenty of yarn to finish. I wasn't worried about running out at all. It's knit corner to corner, so you start with one end and you knit increases along one side, and then you knit decreases along the same side once you get to that midpoint. And I don't think that there is a specified number of increases or decreases in the pattern. It just tells you to make it as long as you want or until you've used half your yarn. I do think that the ends of this are a little bit wonky, like they're not quite the same. I found it kind of hard to figure out how many increases and decreases I had done when I got down to the end. It's kind of funny because I would have expected, if anything, to be the opposite, where the longer rows would make me lose track, but I think I was like flipping my work so much, and because it's garter and the sides mostly look the same. I mean, obviously one side has the increasing and decreasing running along it, but they mostly look the same. So I was I think forgetting to increase sometimes or forgetting to decrease. I do think I did it on both ends. And the two sides don't look exactly the same if you hold them up. So I do think I kind of did something a little bit wonky, but I don't think it'll be that noticeable when it's worn. I do still have to block this, which is fine. I'm not in a huge rush to do that. I had other things that I really wanted to block first, but I do think that this will be a fun thing to wear. I don't really have any... Well, I have one triangle shawl that I've knit, and I find it kind of difficult to know how to wear, but it's also very big, and I didn't make it to the same specifications of the pattern. I made it smaller. It's a Stephen West pattern, and it's meant to use like a huge amount of yarn, and I made it like half the size. So it's possible that I just didn't get the full length that would have made it make more sense, because it's less elongated than I think I would want to actually know how to wear it and not have it look weird in my mind. I think it probably actually looks fine. So I'm excited to try this sort of more elongated shape out, and I think it'll be a nice thing to wear, you know, during my commutes, just around town when it's a little bit chilly, which it's definitely getting chillier here in the Bay Area. So I'm happy that I have this, and I wouldn't be surprised if I cast on another one soon. My second finished object is my coloring book tee. This is a pattern by Amy Sher, and I made it with Knit Picks Muse Fingering and Delight Speckle, which is a 423 yard per 100 gram, 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon yarn that I believe is being discontinued. This color is not available anymore, and there's like only a couple left and they're on sale. So I don't know if you are able to get that, but that is this like speckled yarn that I used. The other yarn I used was probably Bare Knit Picks Stroll, and I used that for the bottom. I did a fade, so you can probably see that the top has more of that speckling than the bottom, because I realized I was going to run out of yarn. Stroll is 462 yards per 100 grams in the 75-25 superwash merino nylon blend. And then I held those yarns together with Mod Yarn's Loopy de Loop in the colorway Like a Virgin, which is 89% superfine alpaca and 11% nylon, and it has this boucle texture that you're seeing. I don't know how well you can really see it on the sweater, but it does have that boucle texture. In my last podcast episode, I went through the whole saga of realizing that I probably wanted something a little bit bigger and more oversized and long sleeved and not cropped than I would be able to make with the Muse alone. So I decided I would fade in some bare yarn, and I think it worked really well. I also managed to make the sleeves like exactly the right length, which I'm very proud of. I tend to have some trouble getting the sleeve lengths right because I am like generally kind of short. I'm 5'4", so I think that's like about average, but it feels short. I do often find that if I knit my sleeve full length, then it ends up like dwarfing my whole arm and covering my whole hand, and then I have to go back and frog it. And like I said in my last podcast episode, I am not interested in frogging this. I was not going to frog it. Nothing could make me frog this because the boucle was just really sticky and it just was a struggle. When I had to drop down, for example, if I missed one of the yarns as I was knitting, that was very difficult. If I had to frog back a few stitches, that was very difficult. So large scale frogging was very much not going to happen with this project. But the sleeves are like maybe a little short, but honestly, that's how I like them. I feel like when I have longer sleeves, I'm prone to sticking them in my food and stuff. So it's just better to have them shorter, especially on something that's like white. I think I probably could have done with a small bit less yoke depth, like maybe an inch, half an inch probably, which is kind of funny because the yarn, it felt like, when I swatched at least, had a tighter row gauge than the pattern. So I was worried that I wouldn't have enough yoke depth, but luckily I didn't add rows. I knit it to pattern. And I mean, generally speaking, the way that this came out is a little bit more oversized, relaxed than the pattern photos. It's intended to be more of a like summer, spring, fall transitional piece, I think, than the one that I made, obviously. I'm really pleased with it. I think that it's a great like throw on, leave the house, look kind of fancy type thing. I think that the fade worked really well. And I mean, it's maybe a little obvious, but well, I don't know. Like by the time I got to the end of the sleeves, I think I didn't have any yarn, at least for one of them, to do any more of the muse in the cuff. So that was for this one. I did modify the sleeves because the pattern doesn't have long sleeves. So I wrote out this whole detailed thing of like the yarn colors I used and the alternation of the different skeins and when I decreased. And I think I did probably like 5 more decreases than the pattern calls for, because I believe it's intended to end like around the elbow and my sleeves are full length. And I do tend to like a pretty tight sleeve. Honestly, those notes don't really make sense to me now. I've been deep in some brioching, so it's like, I don't really know what I did anymore, but I did do it. And if anybody has questions, I can probably decipher what I wrote, but I did modify the sleeves. Now, because I use so many different yarns, it's really hard to tell how much yarn I used in the end of like any particular yarn. I probably could have weighed the loopy to loop, but I didn't. And I want to show you how much of the muse I have left because I'm really proud of myself. When I did the sleeves, I split it into 2 separate balls. And I used one of them fully, but one of them was a little bit smaller than the other. So I used the whole small one and I had like a tiny bit left of the big one. So let me go get that because I forgot to grab it. This is what I have left of the muse. So just like this tiny ball. I have no idea what I'm going to do with it, but it'll go in my scrap pile, I guess. So yeah, overall, really successful project. Oh no, I got some Velcro stuck to it. Okay, it seems fine. Really successful project, super happy with it, and it's already been in pretty heavy rotation for my winter wardrobe. Now, moving on to my whips, I have 2 whips. They're both ones that I think I talked about in my winter plans. I will start with the hat. So the first one is the sea glass hat. That's a pattern by Wool and Pine, and I'm making it with 3 different yarns. This is what it looks like right now. I'm gonna try to, oh gosh, straighten out, whatever. I'm gonna try to straighten out some of the yarns while I talk. This is a fingering weight pattern. It's meant to use leftovers and scraps generally, and I'm using a few different minis for it. For the cuff of the hat, I ended up using this yarn. This is Midnight Lavender by Salty Blonde Fibers, and this is a 75-25 sock yarn. I'm using this natural yarn. The colorway is called Ecru Brute, and it's by Black Squirrel Berkeley. I believe they still offer a bare 75-25 sock yarn, but I don't think they name them anymore. I think they like call them by the weights. This was a mini that I got a good bit ago. And then my final color is this Lucky Dip that I got from Firebird Yarn Co. when I was there for the yarn crawl. They had little Lucky Dips. You could buy one and you could get like a gift card, and I think a mini skein was guaranteed. So this is the mini I got. I don't know if everybody got the same mini, but this is the one I got. I started this on my commute and I did make a short about it. I ended up having to frog it twice. So the first time it was too small. I'm ending up making the adult large because the cuff of the hat was like 7 inches across, I think, when I tried the medium. So during my commute, I made the cuff, I frogged the cuff, I remade the cuff, and then I frogged the cuff again because I didn't like the color. I'm not super prepared. Let me go grab the yarn color that I was originally planning to use. The original mini I was planning to use was this one, or part of it. This is the yarn remaining from Black Squirrel Neon Mini. It was like in-house Black Squirrel branded, and I bought it quite a while ago. It's not in stock anymore, but I used some of it for a sock quite a while ago, and then I used some of it for a Helianthus tank by Andrea Gahn. I'll link the video where I talk about that as well. But so my initial plan was to use this as the bottom of the hat, and I didn't love it, basically. I thought it was a little too high contrast, and the purple didn't go as well. I feel like when I'm looking at it like on camera, it doesn't look as different as these look in real life, although it is generally pretty subtle. I decided that instead of using this mini, I would use this other mini that I had already bought that was in my stash. Basically, I have a bunch of minis from Black Squirrel. I think all of the minis are actually from Black Squirrel. Only some of them are Black Squirrel branded, but I have this like bunch of neon minis, and I've been trying to figure out what to do with them, and in the process amassing more neon minis. But in any case, I think I prefer this purple. I think this purple matches better with like the purple in the pattern. It's a little bit less of a stark contrast, and I enjoy that. I think that that is turning out pretty well. I do wish that the yarn was kind of like pooling less. Like I feel like when you look around the hat, the neon, the Firebird mini is like, there's some spots where it's kind of pooling. The spot where I feel like it consistently has the highest contrast and looks the best is where this beginning of row is, so it'll probably look a little wonky, which is too bad. Unfortunately, I think just with the stitch count that I'm ending up with the adult large, that's how it's going to be, and I think that's fine. I think if it kind of evens out, and I feel like it is a little, like the spots are rotating and it's becoming a little less like color blocked, I suppose, I think it'll work out pretty well. This may be my plain project. I'm not certain. It will remain my commute project for the last couple of commutes I have left. On the whole, it's been a really fun project. I find the 1x1 color work kind of rhythmic and very compulsively knittable. I really want to keep working on it. I want to see also, because I'm using a variegated yarn, how the colors will evolve, and I'm really enjoying it, but I'm not in like a huge rush to finish it. It might be nice to have when I'm in Alabama. I'll be in North Alabama, so it's like a little colder there than it is here, but I'm not in a rush. I think this is something I'm okay taking my time with, and I'm trying to put it down because my next whip is a little bit more, in my mind, a little bit more pressing, although that's all entirely made up. My second and final whip is the September sweater by Petite Knit, and I don't think I had started this when we last talked. At least not about what I've been knitting. I did mention wanting to knit this. This is something I've been wanting to knit forever. It was on my, I think, 2023 Make 9, and it's a petite knit pattern. I'm making it with Knit Picks Simply Wool Worsted Twist in the colorway Wilhelmina, and that yarn is discontinued. It is a like barber pole yarn with this sort of warm gray tannish color and a natural undyed color. They do still offer Simply Wool, but I don't know if they offer any of the twist variety anymore, and it used to be like a separate listing on their website, and it's definitely not. That's definitely not there anymore. The yarn is 100% wool, and it's 218 yards per 100 grams, and I have 7 skeins, so plenty. So far, I obviously made the neck, and I'm almost done with the body. I don't know how obvious it is that I'm working on the ribbing now instead of the brioche, but I am. I think you can kind of tell. It's pretty long. It's like hard for me to show. I'm really close to finishing the body. I think I probably have like 5 to 10 rows. No, not even that much of ribbing. I think the ribbing is 2 1/4 inches in the pattern, and I've done like 1 3/4. So very soon the ribbing will be done. I was kind of hoping to finish it before talking about it, but that's not how it worked out. When I started the project, it felt like it was going really slowly. I think especially when I joined the brioche in the round, it felt really slow, because when you're knitting brioche flat, every row is the same and you're doing brioche knitting. So you're either slipping or knitting every stitch, basically. When you do brioche in the round, you have to do brioche purl stitching. So you have to slip stitches and then purl. And you have to like bring the yarn around because you're doing yarn overs on the slipped stitches. So it felt like it was moving so slowly. Like those first few brioche purl rows, I was like, oh my God, I'll never finish this. And brioche moves kind of slowly in general, just because you're kind of knitting each row twice, because you're like knitting half the stitches and slipping half the stitches, and then you switch which stitches you're slipping and which stitches you're knitting. So it grows slowly and it eats yarn like crazy. But I feel like I've finally gotten into a pretty good rhythm with it, and well, I mean, I'm almost done with the body. My goal is to finish this before I leave. I did do the neckline already, because I wanted that done when I went to try on the body for length. And I did make it a little bit shorter than the pattern, which, you know, as I've said, I'm kind of short. That's not that surprising. I did have to frog back. Otherwise, I think I probably would have finished like an entire sleeve. Basically, on the very front, like maybe here somewhere, I had missed the yarn over for one of the brioche purl stitches. So I just basically did like a regular purl, and I didn't pick up that bar. So that it was on the inside where the stitch looks like a knit, where it's a brioche knit, because you're always working the right side of the sweater in the round. So it wasn't super obvious, but I think because it was front and center, which side is yeah, this side's the front. Because it was like basically front and center, it felt way more obvious than I wanted it to, and I found that very frustrating. And in a fit of hubris, I decided I could just like drop down and pick up the stitches and I would be fine. I'm pretty experienced in brioche. I made most of the September sweater before and frogged it, which I think I've talked about before. I made a whole brioche shawl, and I am pretty good at frogging and picking up brioche and like knowing which stitches to include as the yarn over when you're like picking up the stitch again, and which one is the actual like yarn that's supposed to go through the previous stitch. If you've never done brioche, this might be really confusing to you, and I'm sorry. maybe you want to skip ahead. I mean, it was like 50 rows probably that I dropped back. So the tension was really weird, and it was really hard to keep track that whole way. So it started to look strange. I did try to like fix my tension by sort of like pulling the extra yarn around and stuff, but in the end I felt like I just made it, if anything, even more obvious. And I mean, I knew in some way that messed up brioche stitch would bother me. I think, unfortunately, if you know what to look for, mistakes in brioche are pretty obvious. Changes in tension in brioche are pretty obvious. And they can be, a little distracting. Like, I don't think I'm a super perfectionist with everything, but especially once I'd gone back and messed it up even more, I frogged most of the way back to where I'd originally made the error. The first few rows, I think, when I went to pick them up, ended up looking fine. So I picked them back up, I dropped back, I knit the sweater again, and it did go a lot faster the second time now that I'm kind of in the rhythm of doing a lot of brioche. But it did take the wind out of my sails a little bit. And it is a little bit of a bummer that I'm not further along like I would be if I hadn't done the frogging, but I think it was a good choice to do. I feel at peace with it. Now I just want to focus on knitting as much as possible before I leave. Hopefully finishing the knitting, it definitely won't be blocked, and that's fine. What I'm a little worried about is sizing when I block, because brioche grows like crazy. I think it grows especially widthwise, which in this case will be okay because My gauge was a little tight in my swatch. I haven't measured it since I started the sweater. I have tried the sweater on many times to see what length I want, and I'm trying not to make it, I do want it full length, but I'm trying not to make it exactly the full length I want. This is kind of like the sleeve thing where I'm like trying to anticipate how much it'll grow, and because I haven't blocked a lot of brioche that is going to end up in a garment, I'm not as good at that. Luckily, this yarn is pretty easy to frog. I would say the stitch definition is really good. The yarn is like pretty rustic. It's sticky enough that it isn't like instantly sliding out of stitches and dropping back, like laddering down without you trying to do that. So if I do have to frog it after I block it, it will be pretty easy. And even if I finish it, haven't blocked it, next year have to block it, find that it doesn't fit and have to fix it, I'm okay with that. I just really want the initial knitting to be done. In terms of yarn amount, I should have plenty. I have used 3 full skeins. I have this much of my 4th, and then I used a little bit of a 5th to make the neckline. I mean, I thought for a second about using the outside of this one, but I was like, I think I'll just end up with a tangled mess. So I started a 5th skein to do the neck, but obviously I didn't use that much of that for the neck. So yeah, this is my September sweater. Everyone send me happy, fast knitting thoughts so that this can be done before I leave. In terms of acquisitions, I went on 2 local yarn store trips. I also got an online order, and I guess I'll talk about one of my trips first. So I mentioned earlier this episode that I did a lucky dip at Firebird, and I've mentioned it many other times. And with my lucky dip at Firebird, I got a $10 gift card, and it expires like December 20 something, or it did. I used it already, so it's gone. And that was the catalyst for me going to Firebird this particular time. I did end up spending well over $10, which is generally expected, but I didn't buy a huge amount of yarn, which is my main concern. I have found myself gravitating more towards notions, project bags, etc., and I'm honestly okay with that. I think that that is a decent compromise for when I end up buying a lot. I'll start with this little bag. You got a glimpse of this with my sea glass hat. This is a bag from Lady Alamo Designs, Lady Alamo in San Francisco. It has these California poppies on it. I'm a sucker for a floral. I'm a sucker for poppies. So this was a nice find. And the designer is also local. They're based in San Francisco. I don't know exactly where the bag is produced, but I do think maybe somewhere in the US? Maybe not. Either way, happy to support a local artist. This is, I would say, probably intended to be more of a DOP kit than like a project bag, but I'm finding it really nice for holding my sea glass hat. I think it could hold a lot more than that. I could probably fit a few projects in here. Like obviously not my September sweater or anything, but a few projects. I like having a zipper on a project bag. I like having the handle. I've found that it's like nice when I am commuting with it, especially because like I do have to change trains or sometimes get off trains quickly, and I'm trying to like finish that last bit of knitting. So it's nice that I can kind of like throw all my knitting in, zip it up, and I have this handle that I can just carry it around with. So definitely a good purchase. In general, I just really love like little bags. I have so many of them, and I don't think I'm gonna stop buying them anytime soon. I also got this stitch case. So this is from Comma Craft Co. It's a container for your notions. So as you can see, it has this little compartment here that has space for point protectors. It has a bunch of different compartments for stitch markers and progress keepers, and I have been really happy with it. I had seen this online and I was interested in getting one. And I was happy when I saw it in store at Firebird, and I figured I would just pull the trigger. Along with that, I got just a little stitch marker. I don't know how well you can see it. It says Firebird Yarns on it, and it has their little Firebird logo. The last notions that I got from there are these little cable locks. Basically, I think they came in packs of like 4. This is just one of them. I believe this is from Twice Sheared Sheep. What you do is you can like slide it over your needle or over the cable of like your interchangeable set and stick it on there, and it will keep the stitches from sliding off. And I found this super helpful when I've been working on my various projects recently, especially my September sweater, as I've been like frogging stitches and putting stitches back on needles. I have like the end cap things for my Chow set, but they're like, I feel like I end up using them a lot, and I have like hibernating projects with those on the ends and a variety of things. So which we'll just skip over. So it's nice to have these as an option as well. I think I inadvertently got the size that's like large or medium. It's up to like a US 9 maybe. And I assume that's about the needle that it can fit over. I'm not certain. I've been using it mostly with my cables, and without the needle tips on, I'll just slide it over the cable by itself for my interchangeables, and it's been working really well. And I picked the color over the size, which may have been stupid, but they're working fine for everything I've needed them for so far. Then I got 1 full skein and 1 mini skein of the same color of yarn, which I also got at my next location. I got 1 more full skein of it. So I guess I'll just show that now. I've been doing this thing where I like buy some yarn and I'm like, that's gonna be enough. And then I feel like I need to supplement it. And I was lucky that my next yarn store had the same yarn and the same colorway. This is Seismic Yarns, which is a local to me dyer. They are in Daly City, which is just south of San Francisco. When I originally bought it, I was thinking 2 full skeins felt like a little too much, but 1 skein and I was able to find a mini of the same color would be good. So this is the butter sock base. It's 85/15 superwash extra fine merino and nylon, and there are 437 yards per 100 grams. Based on the way that the price tags look, I think these 2 are the ones that I got at Firebird. This one is the one I got at my other store, but I figure I'll probably make a tee or something out of this. I just really like the colors. I don't know if I said the colorway is white opal. It's from their gemstone collection, and I am a sucker for opals. You can maybe see I am pierced and I have many opals in my ears. They're my mom's birthstone, they're not mine, but I think that she kind of liked them, and I've gravitated towards opals. So maybe the color was part of the inspiration for why I bought it, but I do think I've been enjoying these like lighter variegated colorways recently. I guess I'll then talk about visiting Coven of Stitches next, since I've already talked about one of my acquisitions from there. Coven of Stitches is a yarn store in Alameda, California, and it's where I went to drop off my projects for the winter clothing drive. I made a whole vlog about it. In the end, I think I knit 10 hats and 2 pairs of mitts that I was able to give. I used 818 grams of yarn, which feels amazing to have those out of my stash. And they were due December 1st. And I've wanted to go to Coven of Stitches for a while. I think they opened right around the time of the yarn crawl last year. So they were not an official stop, but they were kind of unofficially, I believe, maybe even did their soft open during that time so that people could come through as they were going around the Bay Area looking at yarn. I got 1 skein of the Seismic Yarns butter sock while I was there, which I'm happy about. And I also got this yarn that is a pretty similar colorway. I know. It's from Bay Farm Dye House. It is the Puff Twisty base, I think, in the colorway Sweet Feast. And it is 399 yards per 100 grams. It's a 2-ply, which is why I bought it. And it's 80% superwash fine merino and 28% recycled nylon. So if you watched my last episode, you know I have this whole 2-ply yarn saga where I'm looking for things to go with yarns that I thought would go with each other, but they don't go that well together in the end. And I figured this was another good one to add to that collection. The yarns in question are primarily green and like a burgundy-ish color with a little bit more variegation. And I think that this has some reds, it has some like lighter greens, and I think it'll work pretty well for that. So this goes into the collection 2-ply yarns that I need to figure out what I'm going to do with them. But Bay Farm Dye House is actually based in Alameda. If you're local, you probably know Bay Farm Island is a part of Alameda. Alameda is made up of like 2 islands, one of which isn't an island anymore. Bay Farm Island isn't an island. I think they did like a landfill thing. It doesn't matter. But in any case, Bay Farm Island is in Alameda, and so it was nice to buy yarn from Alameda in Alameda. The last thing I got from Coven of Stitches are these little stitch markers. They are fruit shaped, and I just thought they were really cute. Coven of Stitches has quite a few stitch markers. They have a lot of sets like this one. There was a breakfast set that had like little eggs and frying pans and I don't know, waffles and stuff that I was pretty close to buying. And they have a bunch of other ones. They also sell individual stitch markers, which I think is really great. So if you want to mix and match, if you only need or want one, you just want to get like one special one, that's really nice. And I think they do have a lot of like community events and stuff too. It's pretty close to downtown Oakland if you are someone who's ever in that neck of the woods. So I definitely would recommend going. I'm looking forward to going again sometime in the nearish future. Hopefully not too soon though, because I have plenty of yarn to use. My last set of acquisitions was, I think I bought them before I went either place, and I maybe received them before I went either place. Definitely before I went to Coven of Stitches. And that is an order from Woolly Thistle that I made. Woolly Thistle is a yarn store based in New Hampshire. I believe the person who runs it is from the UK, perhaps Scotland. Very sorry if I'm wrong about that. Essentially, it's a store that's focused on like woollier wool yarns than a lot of the ones that you find here in the US. So I think there's some, but there's not like a huge amount of merino in that store. There's a lot more rustic-y feeling yarns, a lot of yarns from Europe, and just generally a really nice wealth of things that like are maybe a little bit unique to a US buyer. The reason I ordered from them primarily was because I wanted more biches and bouches Le Petit lamb's wool. So I got 2 skeins of the Le Petit lamb's wool in the colorway light gray. I have other yarn from them that is the same color. Well, some of it is. I also have this color called Bon Bon, which I think you can see has some like variegation on a little bit of like a grayish base. So this is the Bon Bon, or Candy. I think it has both on there. Yeah. During the yarn crawl, I originally bought 2 skeins of the Candy, 2 skeins of light gray. Le Petit lamb's wool is 100% lamb's wool. The balls are 50 grams and they are 270 yards. I bought 2 of each. That might have been more or less what was there. And my intention, I think, was to kind of do like helical knitting and stripe them. But I was worried I wouldn't quite have enough for like a bigger project. So that's why I decided I would buy 2 more skeins of the gray. Unfortunately, the Candy is like sold out everywhere. So I can't get any more of this one. I figured I would get more of the gray. I do have a plan in mind for this, and you'll hear about that in a little bit. I think I'm gonna make a fingering weight like pullover, basically. I just bought more of this yarn, and now I have like 1,600 plus yards of it, so more than enough to make a sweater in my size. The other yarn I got from there was from Ginger Twist Studio. This is a dyer that I am familiar with and a yarn store that I've been to in Scotland. So I got this sheepish sock. It's 400 yards and 100 grams. It's an 80% superwash Blueface Leicester and 20% nylon. I got the colorway Parma Violets, And it's another 2-ply, so it could go in my 2-ply pile, although it is BFL, whereas the other ones are all merino, I think. I mean, I got it because I was drawn to it for the 2-ply 400 yards per 100 gram reason, basically, but also because I have been to Ginger Twist Studio. It evoked some happy memories. So Ginger Twist is a yarn store in Edinburgh. I was lucky enough to go in 2022. Although I believe they have since moved to a larger store. I really loved it there. I had a really great trip. It was my first time to the UK. I did a course in London for a week for work, and then I was able to be there for another like two weeks. I think I was gone for almost 3 weeks. My boyfriend at the time, now fiance, flew in and we traveled around together, and it was just like a really lovely time. So I just was like thinking about when I went there and thinking about Ginger Twist and like how fun it was, and decided that I would get a little bit more of that yarn. I don't know if there's anywhere else in the US that you can get it. I haven't really seen it much, so I got some more. Like I said, I may use it with my 2-ply merinos. I also have this other BFL sock yarn, which, I mean, maybe. This is, I believe, Golden Sheep Fiber is the dyer. They are no longer dyeing. I believe they were local to the Bay Area and stocked by Black Squirrel. I think this colorway is called Gingerbread, and I really liked the color. I was intrigued by the BFL base. I did start knitting a pair of socks for someone with this, and then I frogged them because I think they were not the right size. But in any case, this is maybe possible. I don't know if it's like too, I don't know. I don't know what I'll do with this yet. I just wanted to hold on to it so that I could relive my times traveling the UK in 2022. So that's all that I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed hearing about all of my projects and all of my acquisitions. Hopefully the acquisitions will tone down after Christmas. I do usually get a gift card or money to buy yarn from my fiance's family, so I will definitely be getting yarn in Huntsville. I'm hoping after that I can like come back down to earth a little, knit a lot of things, get a lot of yarn out of my stash, and I guess into my wardrobe to be worn, and basically get ready for the Bay Area Yarn Crawl in March, April. I'd love to hear what you've been working on recently yourself, if you have any projects coming up. I didn't really talk about gift knits, and I mean, part of the reason is I don't really have any gift knit plans, but if you do, I'd love to hear about it. I'm considering some speed knitting of like baby hats or something. I probably won't see you before Christmas at least, and I believe Hanukkah starts the same day, so happy holidays, potentially Happy New Year, although maybe you'll see me again before the dawn of 2025. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. I make videos about knitting, some crochet. I have an embroidery project I really need to start soon, so all things crafty, mostly knitting, and I try to have new videos every week to 2 weeks. I have been making a lot more short form content. I've found that I really enjoy that, so if you're into that, definitely go ahead and check out my shorts as well. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.